Hereditary.
Yeah, so the second one we're doing is Hereditary, directed by Ari Aster. This is his first feature film, and he's never done horror before, so I thought it was pretty impressive. It was produced by A24, who's notably done Get Out, Moonlight, and The Witch, which I call the VV Itch because of the font. It's like two V's and a W.
I didn't see that movie.
Yeah, no, it was, all of them were great movies. A24 has been putting out some pretty impressive stuff and sort of branded themselves as like the cool kids in the film industry right now that everybody's really interested in watching.
That's dope. Get a new Miramax.
Yeah.
No love to Harvey Weinstein.
You know, no love. So when a new A24 movie comes out, there's a certain quality that's expected, a certain, it's going to be a little different. And it's exciting. So I was excited to see this, and I was excited to see Toni Collette perform again. You'll remember her from The Sixth Sense. That might be her biggest breakout role. She played the mother to, was that kid Macaulay Culkin, or am I?
No.
All right, we'll edit that
You're
out.
about like 20 years too late for Macaulay Culkin, but that's all good.
Yeah. What's the kid's name?
I don't remember either.
And look, I was about to make it even worse and say Elijah Woods, which tells you that my white boy child actors are just like all in one. But she's fantastic in this movie. I have to say, it's one of my favorite.
She plays the mom.
Here so far. She plays the mom.
Okay.
Yes, and then you also have Millie Shapiro playing Charlie, the little girl.
Okay.
Alex Wolff playing the son Peter, and Gabriel Byrne playing the husband Stephen. And so, yeah, definitely one of my favorite movies of the year. I thought it was a really complex horror film that also served a function as being terrifying. For critically acclaimed horror films like this, I think audiences have a tendency to want to say it really wasn't even like a horror film. It was like a genre because it's something that's good and getting good reviews, which I hate. It doesn't suddenly become no longer a horror film just because you think it's good.
Right.
But
it's not bad. It's not horror.
Yeah. And I think that's hard to deny with this film, though, because it's scary.
Right.
I mean, the last 20 minutes are terrifying, but I would say building up to that, the majority of the film is more intense and tragic than it is actually scary. There's some creepiness sprinkled there throughout, but that, I would argue, is not the main point. Those flashes, those surprises, here's a creepy image. I think that's necessary to kind of keep the motivation of horror rolling throughout. But the larger story on motherhood and how this family deals with grief in their different ways, because each member of the family dealt with it very differently. All of them were very broken. I think that was the bigger point that the story was trying to tell, and I think it did a really good job with.
So what do you think they were saying about motherhood?
I think, well, first we'll talk about the depiction of the mom, Annie, who Toni Collette played.
Mm-hmm.
She was not a cozy, cuddling mother, and if you look at other maternal horror films, I mean, this is a continuation of your Carries, your Babadooks, your Rosemary's Babies, all of these things. That I think I'm really fascinated by maternal horror because it shows like the horror and the stress of being a mother, and it offers you some grace from this perfection that's expected and this warmness of what's expected from motherhood. So for me, she was harsh at times, and her discipline was questionable, and the way that she spoke to her children was questionable, but I really, really sympathized with her character on a very personal level. I'm going to try to, it's hard to talk about this movie without spoiling it, because something happens 20, 30 minutes in that just completely shifts the course of the movie and the way that you think of it. But there's a point, actually I think I can talk about this very early on, there's a point after, because the film starts off with the death
of the grandmother.
Who, Annie's character, she had an estranged relationship to already, and you see none of the family particularly grieving over the grandmother. Everybody seems to literally be okay. Toni Collette's character, she leaves, tells her husband that she's going out to see a movie, and instead goes to
a grief counseling
group, which to me was so incredibly sad. Mm-hmm. And she
that she went to the group, or that she felt like she couldn't tell her husband.
Both. Okay. That she went to the group and she delivers this long monologue that you can see she didn't intend to go through, where she just unveils this kind of like tragic background of her life, and she says, I just don't want to put any more stress on my family.
Right.
And that even if she tried to go to them, as a source, she doesn't think they could provide that for her.
Right.
And so for me, that sets the tone of the movie. And the opening monologue given at the grandmother's funeral, it sets so much of the tone of the movie between like this relationship of inheritance from her grandmother to herself to, I'll say, her children.
Okay.
That was a huge thing for me. And so I think that's important to show the scary sides of being a mother, to show the scary sides of mothering. And these were complicated female characters.
Your reading of these characters is super generous.
Why would you say that?
I didn't know. I guess I didn't read it as making statements about motherhood.
Really?
Because even though you have these 3 generations of women in the movie, right? I didn't think that they were saying broader things about motherhood, because everything about this family, as presented not only in that opening monologue at the funeral, but then in the scene at the grief counselors, says that this family is perverse and broken and not representative of anything.
But who's at the center of that? The mother. The father is
but then,
and absent.
But do you want to read that then as representative of motherhood if what you're talking about is a family that is by definition aberrational, right? When I read that monologue especially less the one at the funeral, that seemed relatively normal to me. But then when she ran down her family history about who had died and who had killed themselves and who had been killed and how that related to her family, what she was saying to me is, oh, buckle up, audience, I'm insane and everybody in this movie's insane and this is going to go badly.
I wouldn't say that they're insane, I'd say that they're broken. And all the things that she rambled about were stemming from her mother. Reactions and consequences of the things that her mother had done, and she was worried about all of her issues that were passed down to her, doing those same things to her kids. Because later in the film, she talks about her relationships to both of her children and having them. And did she want to have them?
So is this, I don't know. I understand what you're saying. I just think it neglects the most obvious elements of this film. The elements of this film that scream horror movie is that there's something evil happening here. It's not just about women and how they deal with their circumstances, right? It's there's something, even when she explains about like her family history of death, the implication early on is that there's something supernatural and something dangerous happening here, which I thought they did narratively to build suspense, right? Like there's a lot of like, to infuriate you and make your point. There are a lot of not just the suspense element seems almost more indicative of thrillers than of horror, because they want you to hang on to what you think is about to happen for as long as possible.
That's horror.
It might always seem more obvious to me, like
not be a slasher.
Monsters coming, you're gonna get killed.
No, because that's a type of movie. There's your monster movies, there's your slashers, and then there's your horror thrillers, like literal horror slash thrillers.
But you hyphenated.
No, but the thriller can be a subcategory of a horror film just as much as a slasher can be, just as much as a sci-fi can fall into a subcategory of horror.
So you didn't have a problem with